They say the sea takes what it wants, until the night it returned me to the one who'd waited beneath the waves, guarding me since I was small, calling my true name until I finally heard it. They used to tease that Lyanna was born with sea salt in her veins. She could taste a storm an hour before the first cloud stitched a seam across the sky. Hear the harbor's breath turning before ropes felt it tug. Sense the exact moment the tide decided to come home. When she was little, she'd sit on the black rocks at the cove and sing whatever came, nothing learned, nothing clever, just the sound of belonging, shaped into notes. Fishermen swore the current softened when she sang. Her father would ruffle her hair, accuse them of flattering a child, and buy them a beer. The men would grin and let it be a joke. The gulls would wheel lower, the wind would settle a palm on Lyanna's shoulder. She grew, and the town put on new shingles and wider docks and a few loud vacation months that left the place smelling like sunscreen and fried dough. Lyanna worked at the bookshop on the bend, bell on the door that rang like a coin in a glass, paper dust perfuming the air, a drawer of bone folders and waxed linen thread that steadied her hands. She learned who bought poems and who bought puzzles, who skimmed endings first and who never did. She was good at listening. And still there was a quiet room inside her, bare floor, unlit window, that no library could fill. The sea called to that room like a voice in another part of the house, never frantic, never cruel, constant. Some evenings when she walked the strand alone, she felt watched, not the prickle of danger, but a lifted feeling, like standing in a shaft of stained glass light, seen and safe to be seen. She couldn't have said why that made her want to sing. Ron asked if she wanted to go out the night the moon came up orange and over large, a lantern rising from the rim of the world. He had the forearms of a trap hauler and the smile of a man who knew his angles. They'd shared coffee twice and a pier walk once. He told stories about himself as if they were favors. He asked without push. She said yes, because the sea in her bones said yes, because the town felt tight, because sometimes you go to the door that stands open. He brought a small cooler and a smirk for the woman at the bait shop. Lyanna brought a sweater and a tenderness for water she couldn't justify to anyone. The harbor laid them a ripple road. He kept the motor low, edging toward the invisible line where rules thinned and dark began. The air smelled like cold iron and wet rope. The moon laid a silver path, and Ron followed it, as if he could outrun the dark by aiming for the bright. "Ever this far out?" he asked, eyes on the path. Lyanna nodded. "When I was little, I used to climb the point and look for steps. If the sea had stairs, I would have gone down them." "Stairs," he repeated, amused. "That's not how it works." "It could be," she said. It was not an argument. It was a memory her body hadn't lived yet. A breeze slid in from the east and threaded gooseflesh along her arms. Beneath the breeze came a sound like a bow drawn over a low string, the sea clearing its throat. The water stilled in a way that was not stillness, but gathering. A long heave ran under the hull, patient, warning. "Ron," Lyanna said quietly, "we should go in." He angled the boat a little, glanced at the sky. "Forecast said calm. Stars are clean. You spooking yourself?" The second heave was fatter, closer to a shoulder. The boat rolled. Out beyond the shelf, something moved. No shape, only the muscular idea of motion. Lyanna's fingers found the gunwale without asking her permission. "Please," she said, because fear teaches politeness. "Turn us." He looked at her face, then at the water. The third heave wasn't patient at all. The wind arrived like a sheet ripped off a bed. Waves popped up from nothing, snapping the moon road into coins. He twisted the key. The motor coughed and caught. He gunned. The bow swung too hard. The cooler slid and thumped his shin. "Hold on," he said, breath sharpening. He saw a set of navigation lights far off, the promise of help, and angled toward them instead of the harbor. The next wave shouldered them broadside. The world tipped. Lyanna grabbed air and found only water. The boat went over with the sound of a cupboard emptying. Cold closed around her head like a fist. The sky flipped to ink, then smeared. Up and down unlabeled themselves. She kicked, hard. Her sweater dragged, heavy as a hand. The motor thudded down through the dark like a heart missing beats. She opened her mouth to scream and drank salt. Something brushed her calf. Rope? Ron? She flung her arms wide and struck nothing. The water jostled her as if a crowd pushed all at once through a narrow door. She turned once, twice, trying to understand the direction of light. She thought of the bookshop bell, the coin-silver ring of it. If she could ring that here, she would be found. Bells were useless underwater. A voice, no, a splinter of voice, cut through. Lyanna! Not to her, not for her. She twisted. The upside-down belly of the boat loomed ahead, brightened by a sweep of moon. Beyond it, a head bobbed, arms pinwheeling, mouth open toward the distant lights. Ron. He lunged, not toward her voice, not toward her flailing hands, but toward the flare of a boat that might be a mile or a minute away. He saw her. She knew he saw her because she saw his eyes pass over her face like a searchlight skimming a closed shop. He looked back at the lights and chose. He struck out fast, the line of him deliberate as greed. The ocean shoved a laugh out of Lyanna, and it came up bubbles. She wanted to be angry and couldn't afford it. She kicked again, sweater pulling her down, shoes heavy. Her chest gripped and spasmed and went stubborn. She forgot which way the moon lived. A pressure closed around her waist, warm, sure, not rope at all. The water softened in a circle around her as if someone had asked it to be kind. She saw dark hair, the gleam of a shoulder shaped by water, not by sun, the tilt of a face that did not belong to land. She should have panicked. Relief tore at her throat harder than any wave. He put his mouth to hers, not a kiss, not yet. Breath shared like a promise. Rain tasted like this, clean and made of sky. He turned her, angled her body, and drove upward with a long, powerful stroke of something that flashed silver green in the moon. A tail, elegant as a thought. They broke the surface. She coughed sharp, coughed again, clung to air. The waves had lost interest in theater. The wind panted, sated. The inverted hull bobbed 30 yards off. The blue cooler floated like a stupid gravestone. "Ron!" she gasped, turning, searching. He was there, farther now, arms shivering toward the navigation lights, voice gone hoarse with the work of staying alive. He didn't look back. He didn't call her name. He made himself small enough for the distance to carry him and left her to the dark. The hands at her waist steadied. She turned and saw eyes the color of sea under cloud, alert, intelligent, something like amazed. She didn't know his name, but her tongue almost did. He tipped his head, a question. "Can you float? Can you hold?" Lyanna nodded. He touched her once more, brief as a blessing, and slid under. The water took his shape and gave it back, a flicker, a promise. When the rescue boat's lights swept the surface minutes later, she had her arms draped over the inverted hull and her breath in one piece. Men in slickers shouted. A line slapped the water and bumped her cheek. The beam raked across a strong, pale back beneath the surface and was gone. Ron found a buoy and wrapped himself around it like a child. He clambered into the rescue boat by stepping on the hands that lifted him. He did not meet Lyanna's eyes as they hauled her in after. At the dock, they wrapped her in a wool blanket and fussed cocoa into her hands. "You're lucky," a woman said. "Someone was looking out for you." "Yes," Lyanna said, voice trembling. Someone was. The days after the wreck had the floaty quiet of a house after a party. Confetti underfoot, an odd shoe found on a chair, the sense that a crowd had left and a secret had stayed. The bookshop bell rang dutifully. Her fingertips remembered the bite of thread tugging against paper. But every time she looked toward the harbor, something inside her leaned. At night, sleep turned tidal. She drifted through half-dreams of walking the strand and finding shells that looked exactly like letters. She spelled a name she hadn't learned, and sea glass glowed in her palm. In another dream, she stood on the black rocks, and water climbed to meet her, not to take, but to greet, like a delighted animal standing on its hind legs because it couldn't help itself. She woke at 4, the hour all clocks turn, and found her palm gritty with salt, as if she'd slept with the sea folding and unfolding there. The town made talk. Some said freak squall. Some said that boy Ron saved himself first, and wasn't it just like him? Some said someone saw a fin out where the boat went over, larger than any fish. Lyanna listened and said nothing. She went to the strand at twilight. She did not call. She stood where the water could reach her if it wanted. He rose 15 feet away, slow, careful not to startle the fish or the night or her. He rested his forearms on a rock in the shallows and regarded her with the look of a man who had been permitted at last to see what he'd guarded. Gills at his neck opened and closed, neat as breathing shutters, his hair dark as indigo in the lifting dusk. Where tail began wasn't abrupt but inevitable, flesh becoming fin the way a word becomes song. "You!" she said, wise as a gull. Then she laughed at herself, and the laugh unhooked the remaining fear. "Thank you. I wouldn't be here." "You would be," he said, water-low voice smooth over stone. "Just not on land." She glanced past him, toward the place where the boat had gone under. "Did you see him?" "I saw a man choose a light," he answered, neither cruel nor forgiving. "I chose another." "You breathed for me." "Yes." "What do I call you?" she asked, because gratitude needs a name to aim at. "Thalos," she tasting the syllables. "Thalos." "And you are Lyanna," he said, though he asked it as courtesy. They met the next night, and the next. Trust didn't fall between them. It grew, tide-sure. He taught her the undersong of water, how a rip current whispers before it shouts, how cold glass threads under warm silk when the deep shifts. He spoke of outer shoals. His work was thresholds, guiding what could be spared without breaking what must be wild. She told him the bookshop bell and the new boy at the grocer who put heavy things on top until she taught him the stack. He listened like a man who liked questions better than ease. "Why me?" she asked once, knees hugged, tide-tugging calf. "Out of all the children who sang at rocks, why did the sea notice me?" He didn't answer then. He only hummed, one note, low and even. The water at her ankles stirred like a cat deciding to purr. Lyanna stilled. That melody. She knew it without knowing why. It was the shapeless tune she'd sang as a child, the one that got shaped by wind and gulls and her own small lungs. She hadn't sung it in years. She heard it now from outside herself, held steady in the throat of someone who had learned it the way one learns the sound of a loved one sleeping. She reached to the rock beside him and found, tucked in a crease black with algae, a shard of blue sea glass drilled at one end. A child's necklace charm, clumsy beadwork still knotted to it with frayed thread. She sucked in breath. "I lost this when I was 8, she whispered. "A wave took it in that little cove, my favorite. My father said it was the sea keeping a tip." Thalos looked at the shard and then at her, quiet. "I've kept it," he said simply. "I thought, if you came back to sing where you started, it should be waiting where you could find it." She closed her fingers around the glass. Memory thumped through her. A summer night. A small girl lying flat on warm rock, face inches above water, singing not to be heard but to feel vibration through stone. A sleek back cutting the black. A shadow like a man's moving under the ledge and pausing where her small hand had reached down. She had called it a seal. She had whispered hello. The shadow had stilled, as if listening to her hello. She swallowed the heat behind her eyes. "You were there," she said, not accusing. A fact opening in the chest like a door. "I was there," he said, "not from hunger, from recognition." He didn't say he had watched her all her life. He let the shard in her palm, the hummed childhood tune, the memory that clicked into place. Show it for him. Do you always hum that? She asked, smiling. When the water is rough and I want it to be kind, he said, as if he were confessing something slightly embarrassing and utterly true. Ron arrived on the fourth evening with boots and brittle pride and the taut voice of a man bruised protecting his ego. You're out here again, he said. After what happened, that's foolish. What happened, Lyanna said evenly, was that you saw me and swam the other way. He flinched. There were lights. I had to get help. You got help for yourself, she said, no heat in it. Just weather reported. I'm glad you lived, Ron. I won't be scolded for living too. He took a half step as if to grab her arm. Habit, not harm, and the water behind her rose 2 inches with the kind of authority that makes hands reconsider. He blinked, peered, saw only wave. People say you're talking to the sea. I am, she said, and watched him not have a category for that. Be well. He stood aside because some doors don't open for certain keys. He didn't come back. After Ron left, Thalos surfaced closer. You do not need me as a shield, he said. I like that you are one anyway, she said, and touched the water where his hand had been. They began to count nights by what they learned. He taught her the taste of current shifts on her tongue, metal cold when deep water rose. She read him a line from a book. There are no wrong words for the sea, only new translations. He told her of whales that wrote letters, lyrics, stretching rivers of night, answered months later with patience kings could envy. She told him the secret pleasure of tightening a perfect kettle stitch and running her thumb along the spine of a book that would outlast hands. What would it mean, she asked one twilight, to choose the water? Not to trade, he said. Not to lose, to return. Your blood remembers. Consent wakes it. Under the full moon, at the gate rocks, you step of your own will. I hold you while the sea accepts your name. And if I don't, then you will live a life of kindness on land, he said, and meant it. I will keep watch until I cannot. The tide is patient. The week before the full moon, the town pressed in close. The bookshop owner offered Lyanna more hours, a raise, the kind of affection that sounds like money because it can't say other things out loud. 2 regulars brought her pastries and the information that a nice teacher had asked if she was seeing anyone. He plays guitar, one added, as if that sealed an argument. Lyanna smiled and thanked, and felt the room inside her close its window in self-defense. That night, wind came early, mean in its hurry, snapping laundry off lines, making the harbor clack and grind like teeth. The old men on the bench said it was nothing. Then the sky lowered, and the rain arrived in a single wall. Lyanna stood by the window of the bookshop and watched the storm tilt the world. When it passed, the air felt washed thin. The moon rose huge and clean, as if scoured. Lyanna left a note at the register. Thank you for letting me practice belonging until I remembered how. She locked the door. Ron was not on the step. She didn't look for him. The gate rock shouldered the tide in at the far end of the strand, 2 black teeth worn smooth by centuries of mouths. Lyanna stepped between them, and the water licked her ankles, calves, thighs. Cold nipped, then soothed. Thalos rose beyond the gate, hair heavy with water, eyes holding joy carefully so it wouldn't turn to pressure. I'm afraid, she said, because fear loses teeth when you name it. Then we will be kind to your fear, he said. It kept you from foolishness. It needn't keep you from yourself. He reached, and she took his hands. If you wish to stop, you stop, he said. You owe the sea nothing. You owe me nothing. I owe myself something, she said, and the tide leaned in, listening. They moved together into deeper water. He matched his pull to her breath. The old terror rose once, twice, land-born lungs clutching, but each time it broke like a wave that remembers to lay down. He slid his palm over her heart and spoke her name like a key turned. Lyanna. Light threaded her skin in answer. They went under. She did not choke. She breathed, not air, not water, but the instruction buried in her bones. Warmth ran through her chest, throat, limbs, a liquid fire that didn't burn. Light poured down her legs, paused politely at knees. "May I?" And she said yes, without words. Flesh remembered another shape. Two became one, elegant. Scales announced themselves, fine as pearl, catching moon as dust. Her feet lengthened into the winged ends of a thought she'd been trying to finish since she was 6. Thalos held her the way a vow is held, reverent, fearless. When it was done, the sea gave a small current of applause. Lyanna laughed and the sound rang bell-clear through water. Nearby fish executed a perfect turn as if cued. Far off, a whale replied, bass and blessing. "Welcome home," Thalos said. They swam like you walk an old street after years, pointing, naming, letting recognition do its work. He showed her eelgrass meadows where younglings played tag with bubbles, the cliff where cold rivers slide under warm and you can ride the seam like a road, the coral arches where light braids itself into colors no language finishes. She learned with the quickness of someone who isn't learning so much as remembering. Her body grinned. At dawn, he brought her to the lantern gardens, fields of bioluminescent plankton that rose and fell like breathing constellations. Elders waited there, merfolk of many makes, some with fins frilled like lace, some seal sleek, all bearing the peace of those who've outlived weather. No one asked what she had been. An elder with silver eyes and a mouth made for softness asked, "What do you love?" Lyanna answered, "Currents and kindness, the grammar of whale song, bookshop bells, the pause before a story chooses its first word." The elder nodded as if handed a compass. Days unfurled like ribbon. She learned to eat sea grapes and urchin, to share fish in spirals so the youngest always ate first. She learned games, chase the warm thread until it disappears, laugh when it does, festivals, coax plankton into spirals with hum until the sea put stars under her own skin. A right of choosing, not barter, not bargain. Honoring. Work arrived as it always does when you belong. One afternoon, the undersong sharpened to panic. A small fishing boat had cut past the shelf. A trailing net snagged rock. 3 aboard, grandmother, father, child, pinned in place while a wind line marched toward them, a blue-black wall with fists. "Under," Thalos said. Lyanna dove and saw the knot under the stern cinched on basalt. She pressed her palm to it and felt the net's stubborn story. "On 3, she mouthed. Thalos found the lead twist and worked it. She sang one note, low, coaxing. The water around the knot loosened, just a whisper. The line slipped free. Above, the boat lurched and nearly shed its people. Lyanna surfaced level with the child, girl maybe 8, eyes huge. "Float," Lyanna said, voice calm as a teacher's. "Look at me." She kept the girl's eyes while Thalos eased the bow to face the swell. "Row with it," Lyanna told the father, "not against." 3 waves later, they cleared the rip. The wind wall swung past, missed its chance to be a story. The grandmother reached out as if to touch Lyanna's hair and stopped herself, hands shaking with gratitude larger than her courage. "It's all right," Lyanna said. "Go home." "Are you real?" the child asked, breathless. "Very," Lyanna said. "Listen at dusk. You'll hear where to look." Thalos towed the stern until the motor shuddered awake. The father sobbed thanks. Thalos lifted a palm. "Live. That is thanks." Back below, Lyanna shook with afterlight, the bright tremble of having helped without breaking anything. Thalos cupped her face. "Perfect," he said, not to make her bigger, but to make the moment true. He brought her, on a night when the sea wore its stars inside, to a cave open to the sky, a round well of rock where the moon peered down like a face in a bowl. The walls were ribbed with singing stone. Brush them, and the cave hummed your note back. "There is a right," he said, shy as the sea allows, "when 2 choose, not a bargain, an honoring. They placed palms to cheeks and spoke the names the sea had kept for them since first breath, private names that fit like tides inside bone. Plankton rose in green fire, no crowns, no witnesses needed, though the water listened. Husband, Lyanna said in air tongue and undertongue both. Wife, Thalos answered, and the words meant chosen, kept, home. Happily ever after began the way all true things begin, as work and play braided. They guided migrations and sang calves back to mothers and taught younglings to breathe when fear lied. Lyanna went up sometimes at dawn to listen to the bookshop bell ring its coin note. It no longer ached, it blessed. She wrote the owner, I am where I belong. Thank you for the place you made for me while I practiced belonging. A note came back in a jar tied with ribbon. Come by for tea any time the tide allows. I'll leave a cup on the sill. Lyanna laughed and left the jar tucked safely between rocks where the tide could read it. Ron saw her once, far out. Two shapes crested a swell, one gleam of fin. He lifted his cap without knowing why and went home quieter. He learned to teach the new boy at the grocer how to stack heavy things at the bottom and stop telling stories as if they were favors. That, too, was the sea working, a little way inland. Time underwater is not a calendar. It's migration, temperature, the moods of wind. If you must count years, add them, but Lyanna didn't need to. Her hair darkened and brightened with salt and sun. Her eyes learned to read farther into blue. Joy didn't dull from being daily. It clarified. Sometimes she'd rest at the gate rock and watch Thalos with the younglings. How he refused to be clever where true was required. How he laughed like a bell rung briefly and exactly right. Love, it turns out, makes everyone more themselves. On a blown clear winter dusk, Lyanna found a girl on the black rocks, singing nothing learned, nothing clever, just home. The child didn't start when Lyanna rose in the trough between waves. She grinned like 8. Hello, she said. I've been waiting. Have you? Lyanna asked, awe-humming. All my life, the girl said, ordinary as bread. Then we'll teach you to float, Lyanna said, and to listen for the hum in your bones. And when you're ready, if you wish, we'll show you the gate. They taught her, slow and kind. Lyanna learned the sweet ache of watching someone breathe water for the first time, how it made her own lungs feel newly minted. Thalos watched from the next swell, pride warm as current. Not every day was festival. Sometimes work had teeth. Once a tanker strayed and dragged its shadow through a nursery. Lyanna and Thalos and a dozen others sang a road around it until men on the bridge remembered maps. Once a storm came, barbed and ripped, 2 skiffs free. They righted one, hauled the other over the bar, and curled their bodies under a third wave so it would spend itself on muscle instead of men. Sometimes grief arrived, a turtle gone when it should have stayed, a pod missing one voice. They felt it. They let it turn into tending what lived. And sometimes there was only play, racing a school of amberjack until laughter cost breath, lying in a bowl of sand while tide braided hair, inventing a game where you guess the temperature of water by how long the skin tingles. On an anniversary of the night she returned, a date the moon remembered without being told, they swam to the shelf. The sea lifted in its long, patient breath. They rose with it, hands linked, and looked toward shore. The town threw a necklace of lights along its neck. Somewhere the bookshop bell rang its coined silver note. Do you miss anything? Thalos asked, curiosity precise as always. Only the thought, she said, cupping his face, that I might have missed this. He smiled, eyes lit with that careful joy. They kissed, not punctuation but tide. They turned and dove together, one body and 2 names, into blue not as absence, but as fullness. Their days braided work, kindness, and play. Their nights wore lanterns under skin. When children on rocks sang the old shapeless song, Lyanna surfaced and said, Hello, I've been waiting too. Some chose, some didn't. The sea loved both. The gate stayed the gate. Once, years into joy, The sea gave back a memory. On a quiet summer night, Lyanna and Thalos floated on their backs in a black bowl of water that held the stars where they could be counted. "When I was 8, she said suddenly, I lay on a warm rock and a shadow listened to my hello. I remember, he said. You remember? She turned to look at him. The stone hummed, he said, smiling. You sang a song without words, and the current laid itself down around you. You lost a blue charm. He glanced toward the gate rock where she had found it. I kept it safe until you could find it yourself. She laughed, the sound spilling like light. Show not tell, she said, teasing him with a bookbinder's proverb. You're very good at it. Some truths are wrecked by speeches, he said. Better to lay them where the tide sets them at your feet. Thank you for all my feet, she said, flicking her fin. The pleasure is my threshold, he said, and they both laughed at how precise and hopelessly romantic that was. Happily ever after was not an ending. It was the way they lived, choosing again and again with the ease of those who have already crossed the right door. And when people on land said, as they always will, that the sea takes, Lyanna would surface at dusk with plankton sparking along her shoulders. Think of a wool blanket at a dock, a stranger's breath shared like a promise, a child's blue charm found where it had been tucked for her, an answer, in her own chest, if not out loud. It gives. It gave me myself. It gave me him. And then she would dive, and the water would close like a door that is not a door, and below, where bells are made of song and work is made of kindness, Lyanna and Thalos would swim the long lanes of their days, hands never losing each other, names ringing soft as silver through coral halls, always and forever. If you like this story, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps this channel grow. Thanks for watching.